Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 32 of SuperSports. And in this particular episode we're featuring one of my personal favourite SuperSports cars of recent years, definitely one of my favourite cars on Gran Turismo 6, and arguably, I would say, one of the hero cars of Gran Turismo 6. With every Gran Turismo game, we have what you could call hero cars. Gran Turismo 4 had the Ford GT race car. It featured on the front cover, and it was the major new flashy model of the game. Now, obviously there were lots of other notable models, but on each Gran Turismo game there's usually a model which stands out above all others. And the funny thing is, it doesn't tend to transcend from one GT game to another. A car that stands out in one game generally isn't as good on the next one. For instance, for those who played as far back as Gran Turismo 1 or 2, back then, cars like the Castrol Supra were a dominating force. Then in Gran Turismo 3 it became vehicles more like the Toyota GT1 and the 787B and the Gillett Vertigo. On Gran Turismo 4 it became the newer models like the Ford GT LM race car, the Panos, the older Group C models that debuted, the Pescarolos, etc. Then on Gran Turismo 5 it was the newer models like the R35 GTR, etc. And on GT6, I would personally say one of the most dominating forces has been the Corvette C7 Stingray, and also to some degree the masked version and the GT concept version, but in particular the Stingray. It's a fully premium model, as you'd expect from a new car debuting on the game, and straight off the bat, it has to be said that regardless of whether or not you like the Corvette overall, or the C7 in particular, you have to admit that the car has phenomenal value for money. It featured in my top 10 best value for money performance cars on Gran Turismo because it only costs 51,000 credits. That is significantly cheaper than most of the other SuperSports cars in the game, the vast majority of them, in fact, and that's even cheaper than some of the other older Corvettes, such as the C6 Z06, which it's almost half the price of. Now for that, you get a 6.2 litre engine, which you can supercharge up to 920 horsepower. So it's not quite as powerful as the ZR1, but it is more powerful than the Z06 of the previous generation. It's also, of course, more powerful than the C5, the C4, etc. So it sits pretty well, because after all the C7 Stingray is not an ultimate model in the way that the ZR1 was. The ZR1 really took the C6 into borderline supercar territory. Some would say that it is. I would personally say not so much. But the point was, it was the most extreme version, the ultimate Corvette of the 6th generation. With this version, this is far from being the ultimate version. The ultimate version wasn't even released yet when we got this car on the game. Now, we do now have in real life the ultimate version, or what would appear to be probably the ultimate version of the 7th generation, the Z06, which is actually very similar to what a ZR1 could be like. It looks very similar and has similar specs to a ZR1 anyway, they just don't call it that. On the game, though, the Stingray represents more like the C6 Coupe, just the normal Corvette in effect. Now the Stingray is a name which is set aside for Chevrolet's more technically advanced models of Corvette, and that was fitting considering that the 7th generation is a big step up for the Corvette. Now it's to be noted that the Corvette, despite being an American performance car, and American performance cars are typically known for doing things in a relatively old-fashioned way. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, certainly not. I personally think that the old-fashioned ways are sometimes better, especially if it calls for simplicity rather than being overly technical. And the Corvette used that to its advantage. The 6th generation, in fact, was known for being one of the best sports cars and super sports cars that you can buy, especially for the price. With the 7th generation, on the game at least, that's even more so, because it's more technically advanced than it's ever been before. But it still keeps the style, the value for money, and to some degree the old school charm that the Corvette has always had. And when I first saw the 7th generation Corvette, I wasn't sure what I thought about it. especially from the back. It's a radical change from the previous Corvette. Very angular and chiselled. And the Corvette's always been a relatively smooth, sleek looking car. The 7th generation is much more angular, almost GTR-ish in its angles. And I wasn't sure what I thought about that. Now, I love it. I've got used to the car, I love it. And as I said, it's one of my favourite cars on GT6. But regardless of my personal opinion, what does it give you for the money? Because although it is well priced, so are other cars. So what should tempt you away from those with the C7 Stingray? Well, as I already mentioned, you get 920 horsepower from the engine, 852 foot-pounds of torque. It only weighs in at 1,230 kilos, which is, funnily enough, with the full weight loss package, the exact weight of a WRC rally car. And it puts out just under 750 horsepower per tonne, which is pretty good. The PP is reasonably high, 635 pp fully tuned but without the flat floor. So, pretty good. Almost supercar territory, in fact, and in some cases better than supercar territory. The top speed is around 300 miles per hour if you tune it purely for top speed. That's seriously impressive for a SuperSports model. The acceleration is also excellent, and to top it off, it handles better, arguably, than any of the other Corvettes in the game. Now, the older Corvettes are great, especially once you get up to the C5 and C6, so to say that it's even better really is saying a lot. So for 51,000 credits, regardless of whether you're a fan of the car, I would strongly recommend that you give it a try, because just for pure value for money, it is a brilliant all-round machine. But that's it for this episode. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.